Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषः शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 6. Brahmā Satisfies Lord Śiva. So, yesterday I had a Bhagavatam class, so I could not join. How much we have covered?
Up to 26, Prabhuji.
26. So, we are in this section. The section is text 23 to 31, description of the Alaka region. So, I'll just go through a couple of translations. Thus, the demigods saw a wonderfully beautiful region known as Alaka in the forest known as Saugandhika, which means full of fragrance. The forest is known as Saugandhika because of its abundance of the lotus flowers. So, here being mentioned about the Kumāras region, and this particular region is of the Kumāras abode. It cannot be seen from Kailāsa. And this Alaka, so Alaka literally means, Prabhupada says, uncommonly beautiful. Right. Somebody has the name Alaka, so this comes from here basically. So this is, and the Saugandhika is uncommonly fragrant. Text 24. They also saw the two rivers named Nanda and Alakananda. These two rivers were sanctified by the dust of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda. So there is the river of Nanda and Alakananda. And whenever the water is touching lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, it is especially spiritualized and it is free from material contamination. And therefore, it is also very true for the devotee of the Supreme Lord. Devotee are also called as Nanda and Alakananda because they have taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 25. My dear Kasta, Vidura, the celestial damsels come down to these rivers in their aeroplanes with their husbands, and after sensual enjoyment, they enter the water and enjoy sprinkling their husbands with the water. So there is a description of the enjoyment in the heavenly planets. So heavenly planets also there is ahar, nidra, bhaya ityadi, and but the class, is far different than what we generally have. Just like, we can see even within this species, within this planet, we can see dogs having the sensual enjoyment on the road, or the monkeys having sensual enjoyment on the road. But here, the demigods, they enjoy themselves in the heavenly planets. And Srila Prabhupada describes here, anything in touch with the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord is free from material contamination. The damsels of the heavenly planet, polluted by the thought of the sensual life, come down to bathe in the sanctified rivers, enjoy the sprinkling water on their husbands. And the two words are here being used, ratikarshitaha. That means they become morose after the sensual enjoyment. And, so this is one sign. Although they accept the sense enjoyment as the bodily demand, afterwards they are not very happy. Okay. Later, in the 11th canto, Lord Krishna is going to speak one awesome verse to Vidura, which describes that how my devotees, although they know the downside of the sensual enjoyment and still unable to give it up and still struggling at it, slowly advance in their spiritual life. Something to this effect. There is a very beautiful verse which will come up later in the 11th canto. Some important lines here. Anyone who is fixed in the service of the lotus feet of the Govinda is called as Tirthapada. He does not need to travel to the various pilgrimages, for he can enjoy all the benefits of such travels simply by engaging in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So, the advanced devotee, for the advanced devotee, he is called as Tirthapada. What is the meaning of that? That means wherever he is putting his feet, that place itself becomes the Tirtha. Tirthi kurvanti tirthani, as Yudhishthira Maharaj is glorifying Vidura in the first canto. ISKCON, there is a very beautiful story of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, and he was preaching primarily in the African countries, and he decided to give up his body, means perform his final giving up his body in the sense, the process of dying in Africa, in ISKCON temple, because he said that common devotee cannot. He said, I as a sannyasi, as a GBC, I can travel to Vrindavan, I can travel to Mayapur, but I want to thrust upon the devotees that the ISKCON temples are non-different than Vrindavan and Mayapur. And therefore, he took upon himself and he departed from a temple away from Vrindavan and Mayapur in a ISKCON temple. So this is Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthan. Right. At the same time, Gaura Amara Jay Sabasthane, we have to balance both the perspectives. It is important to visit to the holy place time to time, but it is not that somebody is just going 3 days in Vrindavan, then next 3 days he goes to Mayapur, then 8 days in Jagannath Puri, then goes to Dwarka, and that is also not very highly recommended. So both this perspective one has to balance. Text 26. After the damsels of the heavenly planets bathed in the water, it becomes yellowish and the fragrant due to the kumkum of their bodies. Thus the elephants come to bathe there with their wives and the she elephants, and they also drink the water, although they are not thirsty. So this is a Saugandhika water, and this is a different level of enjoyment that goes on in the heavenly planets. Bhagavatam will give some the entry into the heavenly enjoyment also, so that we can become aware that such an enjoyment is available in the material world, and still we become detached and transcend, so that we can focus our attention on the spiritual world. Yeah, please continue. So we come to text 27. Tarahe Maharatna Vimana Shatasankalam Jushtvam Punyajana Stribihi Yathakam Satadit Ghanam. Translation.
The airplanes of the heavenly denizens are bedecked with pearls, gold, and many valuable jewels. The heavenly denizens are compared to clouds in the sky decorated with occasional flashes of electric lightning. Purport. The airplanes described in this verse are different from the airplanes of which we have experience. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and all the Vedic literatures, there are many descriptions of Vimana, which means airplanes. On different planets, there are different kinds of airplanes. On this gross planet Earth, there are airplanes run by machine. But on the other planets, the airplanes are run not by machines, but by mantrikheims. They are also used especially for enjoyment by the denizens of the heavenly planets so that they can go from one planet to another. On the other planets, which are called Siddhalokas, the denizens can travel from one planet to another without airplanes. The beautiful airplanes from the heavenly planets are compared here to the sky because they fly in the sky. The passengers are compared to the clouds. The beautiful damsels, the wives of the denizens of the heavenly planets, are compared to lightning. The summation, the airplanes with their passengers, which came from higher planets to Kailāsa, were very pleasant to look at. Hare Krishna.
So the aeroplanes of the heavenly denizens are bedecked with the pearls, gold, and many valuable jewels. It is not like our experience of the aeroplane, which is made up of the aluminium and the seat belt and everything that goes on with that. No, it is with pearls, gold, and many valuable jewels. And they are compared to the clouds, and there is a beautiful description about. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the different planets have different types of aeroplanes. So as we go higher in the realm of Janalok, Sattalok, Tapalok, Maharlok, so there the difference, the different aeroplanes will be available to the different planets. And then when we go to Siddhalok, the denizens don't need only aeroplane. They can just travel at their will. Srila Prabhupada says, like here the example of traveling at the will without the aeroplane is Nārada Muni, right? So Nārada Muni travels, he doesn't sit in an aeroplane. He just, Nārada Muni, Bajaya Vena, he will just go from one place to another, right? So Prabhupada says here that the aeroplanes that we have, they are used by Tantra technologies. But on the higher planets, the aeroplanes are being used. They are operated by mantra. One classic example of the aeroplane is Pushpaka, right? So it is not that the Pushpaka is operated with some. Pushpaka could expand as a huge city as also, and it could contract as a simple aeroplane carrying, some 10 people, up to millions of people aeroplane can carry, which is like beyond our imagination. And here the heavenly planets are compared to the sky, the aeroplanes are compared to the sky, passengers are compared to the clouds, and the beautiful damsels, they are compared to lightning. And this is in summation, a very beautiful the drishya, the scene to look at and these are like demigods are getting awestruck by this beauty of Kailāsa. Dakṣa was unaware of all this opulence of Lord Shiva, and he was foolishly thinking that Lord Shiva is like a beggar who is moving in smashana and all that. Right. Text 28. Hitva yaksheshvara purim vanasaugandhikam chatat Drumai Kamadughai Drudyam Chitramalya Falachadaihi. Translation.
While traveling, the demigods passed over the forest known as Saugandhika, which is full of varieties of flowers, fruits, and desire trees. While passing over the forest, they also saw the region of Yaksheshvara. Purport: Yaksheshvara is also known as Kuvera, and he is the treasure of the demigods. In the descriptions of him in Vedic literature, it is stated that he is fabulously rich. It appears from these verses that Kailāsa is situated near the residential quarters of Kuvera. It is also stated here that the forest was full of desire trees. In Brahmā Samhita, we learn about the desire tree, which is found in the spiritual world, especially in Krishna Loka, the abode of Lord Krishna. We learn here that such desire trees are also found in Kailāsa, the residence of Lord Shiva, by the grace of Krishna. It thus appears that Kailāsa has a special significance. It is almost like the residence of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna.
So when the demigods were thus moving ahead, while traveling, they passed over the forest called as Saugandhika, full of varieties of the flowers, fruits, and the desire trees, Kalpa Vriksha, right? Kalpa Dugai. And while this, they could see the region of Yaksheshvara. Yaksheshvara is Kubera. So Yaksheshvara is Kubera, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport. And what it means is that the management team is now going to see the house of CFO, Chief Finance Officer, right? He's a treasurer of the demigods. And that planet is fabulously rich. Kubera is a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and therefore he lives just next to Lord Shiva. And, and therefore the city of Kubera is next to the city of the planet of Lord Shiva, that is Kailāsa Dham. And this planet also is filled with the desire trees. Srila Prabhupada says we have heard about the desire trees in Brahmā Samhita, Chintamani prakara sadmasu kalpa vriksha lakshabhriteshu surabhirabhipalayantam. So Chintamani prakara sadmasu kalpa vriksha. So kalpa vriksha we have heard. And he says because Lord Krishna, Lord Shiva is so dear to Lord Krishna, the kalpa vrikshas are also there in the planet of Lord Shiva. So just like Lord Shiva is almost like Lord Krishna, kshiram yatha dadivikara vishesha yogat. Similarly, the planet of Kailash is also almost like Vaikuntha. Because, it is like one classic example here is recently Mukesh Ambani, one of his friend and very dear person to him, and he recently gifted him something like 1,500 crores worth mansion. And he's thought that I'm living in such a big bungalow. You are my close friend, and he's serving Reliance for almost like more than 40-45 years now. And he said, you should have something like me only. So, Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva is very dear to Lord Krishna, there is in a way not a difference, because when Lord Vishnu is in touch with the material nature, is called as Lord Shiva. And therefore, Kailash also is as good as Vaikuntha, along with all this Chintamani, Prakara, Sadmasu, especially Kalpa Vriksha. Text 29. Raktakantakaganīka Svaramandita Shatpadam Kalaham Sakula Preshtham Kharadanda Jalashayam. Translation.
In that celestial forest, there were many birds whose necks were colored reddish and whose sweet sounds mixed with the humming of the bees. The lakes were abundantly decorated with crying swans as well as strong stem lotus flowers. Purport: the beauty of the forest was intensified by the presence of various lakes. It is described herein that the lakes were decorated with lotus flowers and with swans who played and sang with the birds and the humming bees. Considering all these attributes, one can imagine how beautiful this spot was and how much demigods passing through enjoyed the atmosphere. There are many paths and beautiful spots created by man on this planet Earth, but none of them can surpass those of Kailas, as they are described in this verse.
Raktakantha, this is the reddish colored birds. And the celestial forest of Saugandhika, there were many such birds, and they were making the sweet noise mixed with the humming of the bees. And thus the lakes were abundantly decorated with the swans and the strong stemmed lotus flowers. So the forest is known as Saugandhika, especially because of the lotus and abundance of the lotus flower. And therefore, there were swans. Automatically, the swans were attracted. Crows will not be attracted to the lotus flower. The swans will be attracted to the lotus. And the swans played, they were singing. And Prabhupada says, on this planet also, we try to create some beauty, but it has no comparison. Sometimes we go to the Western developed countries, we'll see some beautiful lakes and, very, very a great architecture of this. But there is none of it can be compared to the glories of Kailash, which is being mentioned here. I want to speak of we getting amazed. Here, demigods also greatly wonderstruck when they saw this beautiful Kailash mountain. Text 30. Vanakanjara sandrishta harichandanavayuna adhipunyajana strinam muhu unmayatmanaha. Translation.
All these atmospheric influences unsettled the forest elephants who flocked together in the sandalwood forest, and the blowing wind agitated the minds of the damsels there for further sensual enjoyment. Purport: whenever there is a nice atmosphere in the material world, immediately there is an awakening of the sensual appetite in the minds of materialistic persons. This tendency is present everywhere within the material world, not only on this earth, but in the higher planetary systems as well. In complete contrast with the influence of this atmosphere on the minds of the living entities within the material world is the description of the spiritual world. The women there are hundreds and thousands of times more beautiful than the women here in this material world, and the spiritual atmosphere is also many times better. Yet, despite the pleasant atmosphere, the minds of the denizens do not become agitated because in the spiritual world, the Vaikuntha planets, the spiritualistic minds of the inhabitants are so much absorbed in the spiritual vibration of chanting the glories of the Lord that such enjoyment could not be surpassed by any other enjoyment, even the sensual enjoyment, which is the culmination of all pleasure in the material world. In other words, in the Vaikuntha world, in spite of its better atmosphere and facilities, there is no impetus of sensual life. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.59, Param Drishtva Nivartate, the inhabitants of Vaikuntha are so spiritually enlightened that in the presence of such spirituality, sensual life is insignificant.
Yeah. All this atmosphere. So now, we are just going shloka by shloka. So generally what happens is we forget the previous shloka by the time we read the next one. But there are the aeroplanes, the extremely beautiful personalities moving around, the very, very fragrant atmosphere, everything very pleasing to the senses. There are trees, the banyan trees, if we just, the move around, there are fruit-bearing trees. All this atmosphere unsettled the forest elephants, Vanakunjaraha, and they flocked together in the sandalwood forest. And this blowing wind agitated the minds of the damsels for the further sensual enjoyment. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that whenever there is a nice atmosphere in the material world, there is always awakening of the senses. And because senses are engaged only in sense gratification, there is always a awakening of the sensual impetus. And this is in complete contrast with the spiritual realm. Why? Because in the spiritual realm, senses have another engagement. And that's how the bhakti is being defined, right? Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirvanam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. Because we are training our senses to be engaged in the service of Rishikesha, whenever there is a better atmosphere, devotee will engage in the better service. On the contrast, in the material realm, whenever there is a better atmosphere, when the senses are enlivened, there is, and therefore Chaitanya Charitamrita very beautifully says, Atmendriya pritivancha dhare kamanam, Krishnendriya pritivancha dhare premanam. Right? So, Indriya Trupti is there. And when there is an enlivening atmosphere, it is Indriya Trupti will come up. But when one is satisfying one's own senses, then that is material atmosphere, that is called as kama. But when the enhanced facilities leads to enhanced service to the Supreme Lord, that is called as spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada says there are better atmosphere and better facilities, but because they have the higher pleasure coming from the spiritual realm, what is that pleasure? The inhabitants are so much absorbed in the spiritual vibration of chanting the glories of the Lord. Madchitta, madgata prana, bodhayanta parasparam, kathayantascha mam nityam, tushyanti cha ramanti cha. Because they have this higher taste, param drishtva nivartate, right? Vishyami nivartante niraharasya dehina, rasovarjam rasopyasya, param drishtva nivartate. When they are transcending that higher taste, one will naturally the sensual life will become insignificant. Again, needless to say, it has to be age appropriate and progressively one should be advancing towards this realization, not suddenly and out of the out of context. Text 31. Vaiduryakuts krita soma sopana vapyutpalamalini praptam kim purushai drishtva te arat dadrushu vatam. Translation.
They also saw that the bathing ghatas and their staircases were made of Vaiduryamani. The water was full of lotus flowers. Passing by such lakes, the demigods reached a place where there was a great banyan tree. Hare Krishna.
So now they also saw the bathing ghats and the staircase, Sopana. Sopana is the staircase, is full of the Vaiduryamani. Correct. Water was full of the lotus flowers. Looks like time of lotus has come, in India also. And Up to everywhere lotus is there. Anyway. And then they reached a place where they saw a great banyan tree. Okay, now this is the banyan tree. This is the celebrated banyan tree where Lord Shiva resides at this banyan tree. And thus we come to the next section, text 32 to 41. Darshan of Lord Shiva as seen by Devata. Okay, this is the huge banyan tree. Amazing description of the where Lord Shiva is sitting, the great personality, Lord Shiva sitting at a great place. We have just walked through the Vana and Upavan, the terrace of Lord Shiva by now. Now we are coming to the residence of Lord Shiva, which is under the banyan tree. Text 32. Sahayojanashata utsedah pada'una vitapayatah Paryakrita chayah nirnidam tapavarjitah. Translation.
That banyan tree was 800 miles high and its branches spread over 600 miles around. The tree cast a fine shade. Sorry, can somebody please continue?
Tree cast a fine shade which permanently cooled the temperature, yet there was no noise of birds. Purport. Generally, in every tree, there are bird nests, and the birds congregate in the evening and create noise. But it appears that this banyan tree was devoid of nests, and therefore it was calm, quiet, and peaceful. There were no disturbances from noise or heat, and therefore this place was just suitable for meditation.
Yeah. So this is banyan tree. Sa yojana shata. Shata yojana. 1 yojana means 8 miles. Right. If you see the translation, 1 yojana is equal to 8 miles. And this shata yojana means this tree was 800 miles. Right. 800 miles means approximately 1200 kilometers. Now let that figure sink in our mind. The banyan tree under which Lord Shiva sits is 1200 kilometers. This is only the tree, right? And the branches, now the vistara, right? The flora and fauna of this tree, it's 600 miles around. So 600 miles is 900 kilometers. Somebody can just do a quick check. From Pune, what is the place 1200 kilometers? And from Pune, what is the place 900 kilometers? Or from your city, wherever it is. This is the banyan tree under which Lord Shiva sits. What can we understand pastimes of Lord Shiva and the master of Lord Shiva, Lord Krishna, Lord Vishnu? We are simply so insignificant. Apna life to pura in 1 BHK EMI dete only, most of the people, most of us just shift from 1 BHK to 2 BHK, and that is Janma Safalya. Here is the banyan tree, which is 1200 kilometers high and 900 kilometers wide. And yet there was no bird on that tree. Why? Because Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, generally the tree means there will be birds nest, and there will be always Gunjarva, or always there is a chirping of the birds. But this tree is a very special tree, and this tree is used for the meditation by Lord Shiva, and therefore it has to be very quiet and calm, and thus there were no birds. There is a beautiful story which comes that once upon a time, one bird came there. And that was the time Lord Shiva, he was narrating Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam to Parvati, and this bird hid himself in this huge tree. Now, look at the tree. It is 1200 kilometers high and 900 kilometers wide. And there one bird just entered inside. It's very difficult to locate such a bird. And when this bird was Shuka, and he was very attentively hearing what Lord Shiva is speaking to Mother Parvati, and while the narration of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Mother Parvati, she slightly dozed off. And the hunkara that Mother Parvati was giving previously, that was gone now. And the bird became very frightened. Bird was thinking, if the hunkara doesn't come, Lord Shiva may stop the narration of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And therefore he thought that although Mother Parvati is sleeping, Lord Shiva is in full ecstasy explaining Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And in between, time to time, in the voice of Parvati, this bird, Shuka, he started, giving that hunkara. Go ahead. Nice, wonderful, like that. And he heard entire Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from the lotus mouth of Lord Shiva. So this is how Lord Shiva is connected. This tree is connected to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And then suddenly Lord Shiva, when the Bhagavatam was over, he saw Parvati is taking good rest. And then he was wondering, who is doing all this hunkara? This Bhagavatam is very, very special. It cannot go to any ordinary person. And then he realized there is a Shuka. And then Lord Shiva is easy to please, easy to displease also, right? He picked up his trident, started running towards the Shuka. And the Shuka was, for his life, he was just running away. And that was the time, it is explained that wife of Vedavyas, she was yawning, and suddenly the Shuka parrot entered her. And now Lord Shiva said, how can I kill somebody who is a pregnant lady? And Shuka parrot was so absorbed in this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that 16 long years he was enjoying, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam within the womb. And Vedavyas was wondering, why my child is not coming out. And finally, he began to pray to the child that, please come out. The child said, no, there is a lot of Maya outside. I will not come out. And then finally, Vedavyas got Lord Krishna there. Lord Krishna personally promised Shuka that my Maya will never touch you. And then Shukadeva Goswami came out simply to walk away. And this is the beginning of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, second verse, Taravo Bhinedus. That, Vedavyas is in great separation from his son, who took the birth and simply in that Digambar state, simply walked in the forest, has nothing to do. And he is crying, in separation from the Putre Titanmayataya Taravo Bhinedus. And that is the verse. And this is how Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is greatly related to this banyan tree also. So this is the banyan tree. This is the abode of Lord Shiva. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna, Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, this Kailash which we are discussing, it's not the one which is outside of Brahmajyoti, right? It's within the material world.
Yes, because demigods are traveling there.
Yes. Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.